600 wins, 6 Georgia State Championships, 16 Regional Championships, 2-time National Coach of the Year, first team from Georgia to win the City of Palms Classic, the nation's #1 high school tournament, first team in Georgia history to attend the Dick's Sporting Goods National Tournament of Championships. He's produced numerous NBA players and professional basketball players all over the world. It's real basketball talk. It's real help and real life with Coach Doug Lipscomb on the BG Podcast Network.
And welcome once again to this week's Coach Doug Lipscomb Show, one of the winningest high school basketball coaches in all of America. The Coach Doug Lipscomb Show brought to you this week by the State Farm Carriage Automotive Group Basketball Classic, coming December 2nd to Milton High School in Alpharetta, Georgia, featuring some of the top teams in the state of Georgia, including Trinity Christian versus Holy Innocents, Johnson of Savannah versus Lithonia, Shiloh versus Langston Hughes, Pebblebrook versus Jonesboro, an incredible matchup, and the home team Milton versus Rockdale. That's again coming December 2nd to Milton High School in Alpharetta, Georgia, presented by the good folks at State Farm and the Carriage Automotive Group located in Gainesville, Georgia, the coach's hometown, and Woodstock, Georgia. But nonetheless, Coach, how are you today, my friend?
Great. Good to be here.
All righty, Darren Sutherland here, and let's just jump right into it, Coach. You know, we've talked about basketball. We've talked about all the fun stuff. But before we get on with the show, tell us a little bit about the High School Classic coming up December the 2nd.
It's going to be a great event. State Farm and Carriage Automotive are supporting us, and we really appreciate their support. It's going to be a lot of fun. It starts at 2:30. Trinity Christian is a very good school. So is Holy Innocents. Johnson of Savannah is always competitive. Lithonia is loaded with guards. Shiloh is a well-rounded program. Langston Hughes, defending state champions. Pebblebrook is always in the state finals. And Jonesboro, very good program. And, of course, Milton and Rockdale to finish tonight.
It's going to be a great night. That's a great afternoon of basketball starting December the 2nd at Milton High School in Alpharetta. Coach, for those who've never listened to the Coach Doug Lipscomb Basketball Show, let me give you an outline of what you're going to hear here, folks. You're going to hear about AAU basketball, high school basketball, local and national. You're going to hear from players. You're going to hear stories about coaches, the inside, the outside, and what you hear on the street that isn't necessarily true. We're going to justify a lot of it and going to straighten you out. Ain't that right, Coach?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's just jump right into it. I want to talk about the coach's background a little bit today. Coach, so many folks relate you solely to Wheeler High School, and they should, because 25 years there, 6 state championships, 18 region championships. You know, you were on the national scene, played in countless tournaments, coached the McDonald's All-American. But there's more to Coach than that. It all starts in Gainesville, Georgia.
Yes, and definitely. I was a red elephant.
You were a red elephant and played basketball and baseball there,
yes,
if
sir.
I'm not mistaken. Tell me some of your, high school basketball coaches have always been great influencers in athletes' lives. Tell me about some of those influencers in Gainesville, Georgia, that not only influenced your life but influenced you as a coach.
Well, basically every kid in Gainesville growing up at my time, when I was growing up, like I said, they came through the boys club, so that was always very beneficial to everybody in our community. And my father was very influential in my life. He was the rock of our family, of course, and in any event that I participated in, he was always there.
Tell me about your father. What do you do for a living?
Well, when I was growing up, he was, I guess you would call it a custodian. Some people say janitor. It doesn't really matter what you call it. He went to work every day. He worked hard, and he taught us the benefits of having a good work ethic.
Now, how many brothers and sisters you got, Coach?
I have one brother, and I have an uncle son who's just like my brother. And, of course, we're a very close-knit family.
Who challenged you to get an education?
Well, believe it or not, it was Dr. Al Thweet. When I was younger, like I say in my early 20s or midway, I was a juvenile probation officer when I stopped playing basketball. And some of my clients were on my team because I coached the junior high team. And he said, no, you need to start teaching. And that's how I got involved with education.
So you go from being a juvenile probation officer to being a high school or middle school coach. Which one was it? Where'd you go from?
I was a middle school coach.
Middle school coach.
Yes.
Then you were an assistant at Gainesville High School for 7 years, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Left the Red Elephants, came to Wheeler, Cobb County, Georgia. What'd you know of Cobb County when you came here to start off?
Not a thing at all.
I mean, now, if we look at it, and folks listening all across the country, Wheeler's about 45 minutes northeast of Atlanta. And back in the day, Gainesville was a long drive. I mean, it's still a long drive, but with the Mall of Georgia and everything else out there now, you think it's closer. But Gainesville back in the day was a world away from Atlanta, was it not?
Oh, yes, and it was always a reward for the boys at the boys club. We could go down to the Braves games back in those days, and basically you sit wherever you wanted to.
That's right, at the old Fulton County Stadium. And we had that. So you came to Wheeler High School to take over the team. And you had told me this in the past, but the principal said, how long do you have to win a region championship there?
You got 2 years.
2 years to Did you – okay, Coach, now here's the trick question. And you guys that are principals out there, or athletic directors listening to this show, I want to know what your reaction would have been. He tells the coach he's got 2 years to win the region championship. It takes over a 4-20 team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
You've got 2 years to win a region championship. Coach, did you win the region in your first 2 years?
No, I did not.
You did not. However, what did you win, Coach?
Won the state championship.
Tell us about it.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Our kids were all in tune. They were together. They played cohesive basketball, making extra passes. And I lived in the same area as the kids, so it was no problem for us to pick each other up and, get to school and come back, hang out, go back to the gym again.
Now, this is the only thing we're going to mention about local basketball. But when I was doing my homework for this show, I had a friend of mine that said to me, Coach won that state championship, but he didn't win the region because Pope won the region, and we beat him 4 times that year. How did you end up winning the state without having to go through Pope again? Do you recall?
Well, basically, they had an off night, which can happen to anybody, and we advanced, and they didn't.
Right. Nice. Anyway, so you got the coach's history, okay? Coach, you made it to the national scene with Wheeler. When did you realize, and we're talking about the coach's history here on the BG Podcast Network with Coach Doug Lipscomb at the Doug Lipscomb Show. Coach, when did you realize that it was time to take Wheeler to the next level, past just the state mark, and say, hey, we've measured ourselves against the best team in the state of Georgia. Now we need to measure ourselves against the best teams in the country. When did you realize that?
By my second year, I felt like it was time for our kids to get the maximum exposure that we could get, and we had a very well-known athlete by the name of Sharif Abdur Rahim. So we were able to start our national schedule.
Sharif, he changed the program at Wheeler. People talk about one player changing a baseball team or a football team or whatever. Many can say in this day and time that Herschel Walker changed the Georgia Bulldogs for whatever reason. They won a national championship. So you could virtually say, and maybe I'm not, I know it takes a village. It doesn't take just one player. But Sharif really helped you put that program on the map. Would you agree?
Most
in the
definitely.
early days?
Most definitely. And then the kids like D.A. Lane, Antoine Dixon, and Eric Desmond, Mike Santos, and those kids, they had a lot of heart, and they wanted to prove that they were much better than that 4-20 record that they had before I got there.
Sharif leads your team to the state championship, of course. Sharif's a top recruit. Tell us about Sharif the person. You've told me a little bit off the air about Sharif the person, but tell me about Sharif and his mindset and his gentlemanness and just a little bit about Sharif.
Extremely quiet person, very competitive, and had a tremendous work ethic. He didn't have a choice at that time because we basically lived in the gym along with everybody else on our team. So
it's awesome. Hey, we're going to take a break right here on the Doug Lipscomb Show right here on the BG Podcast Network. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little AAU basketball. I want to talk with the coach a little bit about recruiting and how college coaches get involved. We may talk about some recruiting of his former players and his relationship. You're listening to the Coach Doug Lipscomb Show on the BG Podcast Network. And welcome back to the Coach Doug Lipscomb Show on the BG Podcast Network. Darren Sutherland here with Coach Doug Lipscomb, one of the winningest high school basketball coaches in America. And every week, listen to our show where you'll hear the best on AAU high school recruiting, state rankings, national rankings, and all kinds of fun. You'll hear from some of the best college coaches, some of the best NBA players, and just some of the best people in the country. Coach, when we took a break, we came back and we said we were going to talk a little bit about college ball and recruiting and how that works. The average fan, Coach, really does not understand the pressures that these young men go through during the recruiting process. You've got Sharif Abdul-Rahim as a young 16, 17-year-old kid, probably being noticed as young as 15 by college coaches. And it's changed since the 90s, so to speak. We're in 2017. We hear rumors and stories of kids in the 8th grade being reached out to by different schools across the country. How young does it actually start nowadays, the recruiting of athletes, student athletes?
Well, I would say it would probably start around the 7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th grade. We're talking 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. What are colleges doing to a kid in the 7th grade to entice them to start looking in that direction?
Well, basically, if you're a kid and you see, say, for example, a Georgetown at your AAU game, you're going to relate the Georgetown Hoyas are here watching me.
Wow.
So
who were some of the first schools to start recruiting at a younger age? I mean, we all set precedents in life. You set precedents in the way you coach, the way you built your program. What are some of these college coaches out there that in a positive way have set precedent? Because right now in the news media, we hear a lot of negative about college basketball. We hear of the recruiting scandals that the FBI is involved in. But there's some great programs out there that have set recruiting precedents that you've seen on the inside through the years that have done a good job. Who's some of those coaches and programs?
Well, this is how I think things are really evolving. Social media, of course, is really a big influence in being able to visually see these people day in and day out. I mean, you could ask any kid, basically, where did Michael Jordan go to college? That's an easy question. So that's what's happening. That visual thing is very important now. So all major schools are going to be seen at these events. And you know what's so crazy is, like, I think you and I had a discussion where they were even ranking kids that were in the 5th and 6th grade, so that's how it has evolved.
Let's talk about this, because we've both seen this in different levels, talking about AAU, and I was going to mention this later, but since you touched on it there, younger kids, the parental involvement in these kids' life. Sometimes it's a direct parent, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's an uncle, sometimes it's a grandmother. To the parents out there, you've got a superstar young man or daughter that's playing a sport. What advice would you give to that parent, that guardian, that leader for that kid to do the right thing and follow? Because guess what? Everybody thinks, and they should think this, that their child is the next Michael Jordan. We all know that's not the truth, okay? If, 1 in 1,000 make the league, okay? But what do you say to those parents of those 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th graders that the college coaches are starting to see now, that you're getting the handshakes from the college recruiters introducing themselves to you? What do you say to those guys, Coach?
Well, first of all, I would just like to say that let your child be a child and grow up and enjoy their childhood, because so many people that get put in the spotlight at an early age, they really don't get to enjoy the part of their life where other people have enjoyed it. So let them take time away from the game, but at the same time, improve your craft. Of course, people are always going to tell you things that you want to hear, positive things. I mean, rarely ever do you walk up to somebody and say, boy, you look bad today. So it's always, you look great. And that's what people want to be patted on the back and they want to be told how good their kid is. So that's just common.
As a coach, you've had superstar players through the years.
Yes.
We've mentioned Sharif earlier. But you had to get on Sharif and tell him what he had to do better. You had to challenge him. What do you say to these parents who don't like it when a coach is challenging their child? Because there's parents out there like that are challenging their child. And I'm sure you've had meetings and discussions with them, because everybody in basketball wants their child and the 4 best kids on the floor at any given time. They don't want to see their kid number 7 or number 8. And as I've often said it, as the cylinder gets narrower, they drop off. What do you say to those type parents that, hey, you're on the coach's back? Because I've often said this, Coach, the easiest place to challenge guys when his back's turned to you. Your back's turned to the crowd, so the parents can challenge you the whole time when you're coaching the game. You follow what I'm saying?
Almost definitely.
What do you say to those parents? Because you've had those parents. I'm not going to ask you to mention names. I promise you guys, I could tell him mention 5 names, and he'd tell me off air. He's not going to tell me right now. But give me an example of a parent situation where you've had to sit down and say, hey, boom.
Well, I've been fortunate enough that I didn't have to explain why, say, little Johnny's not on the court right now.
Yeah.
Because little Johnny comes to practice, and it's very apparent that either he's going to make it happen or he's not. I mean, rarely ever can you say a coach has a superstar sitting at the end of the bench. It just doesn't make sense, So they just don't correlate, So, and as far as you coaching a kid, you're either going to coach him now to make him better, or when he gets to the next level, somebody's really going to give him a rude awakening. And then the parents are going to realize, well, maybe what coach was telling us is true. So that's why we always get back to this thing about recruiting, and then we get back to the transferring of kids after their first year of college.
You had told me earlier, 70% of kids transfer their first year of college to another college to play.
Most definitely. And I tell you what, if it's not 70, it's definitely going to be close to that.
Why does that happen?
Well, basically, you've been given a perception that this is the place for you to come. And then when you get there, you realize that everybody else there has been told the same thing. So that's why it's never good to tell a kid you're going to start, okay? Because if you tell 10 people that, well, let's do the math. Only 5 can be on the court at one time.
Right.
So they have a misconception.
We mentioned earlier in the show your first great player that helped put you on the map, Sharif Abdul-Rahim. If you follow basketball at all, Sharif went to California?
Yes,
California.
Mm-hmm.
At that point in time, it was very unusual for an athlete in the Southeast to go to California and play college basketball. I know at the end of the day it was Sharif's decision. I'm sure he counseled with you, Coach. You've seen coaches from all across the country come in to watch Sharif play. What goes into a decision of a young man on what college to choose and why choose that college?
Well, I would say the major part of it is feeling comfortable and being confident that you've made the right decision on where you would like to go to college and continue your education. And with him, he enjoyed the visit there and the people there, and he felt very comfortable there, and that's why he went there.
Who are we all see college coaches on TV coaching, but people don't realize, as big as coaching is and X and O's are, that recruiting is just as big a part of their job as anything else, okay? When you're a high school coach on your level, a national level, and you get to meet these coaches, is it pretty apparent who the better recruiters are compared to coaches? Or are they the same across the board? So what I'm asking is, yes, they've got 2 jobs. They've got to coach a team and they've got to recruit a team. You have to be just as good of a recruiter as you do a coach to be at that level. Is that?
I think that's very true, but at the same time, if you want to be very honest about it, and I always believe in that, the recruiter or the assistant coaches do the majority of the recruiting, and they don't get enough credit. And when things don't go well, then they're the blame for it, which is totally unfair.
So, the big guys, they're shielded, so it's the guys under them is what you're saying that kind of gets the bad rap.
Most definitely.
So when let's say you're coaching Wheeler High School, okay? I saw this with my own eyes, so I'm going to just bring it up. You got Rick Pitino sitting courtside. What's Coach Pitino there to do that night? Just evaluate the kid, or is he there to talk to the kid? What's going on?
I think that's part of the process of evaluating. You want to see it with your own eyes up close. You also want to make sure that this kid has a knowledge of the game itself, because fundamentals are extremely important. Skill setting and the basketball IQ is definitely most important.
We mentioned we were going to talk about AAU. How does AAU correlate in the recruiting world with high school basketball this day and time? Is it just another showcase for the college coaches to see the players? How does that work? A lot of people don't understand what AAU is. AAU, folks, is travel basketball, so to speak, where you bring your own team in. Am I correct, Coach?
Most definitely, you bring the best players that are in your area or close to your area to compete against each other. And
so it could be 5 different high schools and 5 different players playing on the same team in AAU.
Yes, they don't all have to come from the same high school. And the thing about it is, the best talent in the country is there.
Who's the best AAU player you ever saw? LeBron James. And that's an easy talking point. So tell me about the first time you've seen LeBron James on the basketball court, Coach.
I mean, he was just he had that it factor, as you would say, and you could just see he was going to be a special talent.
How old was he?
I think he was 15 or 16 at that time. 15?
Wow. So you could tell LeBron was going to be LeBron when he's 15 years old. That's some other players you saw in the AAU world. Who were the first time you saw? You were like, wow.
Kobe Bryant. Yes, of course.
From Philadelphia.
Yes.
What made Kobe so special?
He's very skilled, fluid.
Smooth. Coach, we've talked about superstars. I mean, Hall of Famers, instant Hall of Famers, and LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, 2 of the top 50 players in the country. And when you saw them play AAU, they went straight from the high school to the pro ranks. So many players have done that, but very few have maintained greatness from the time they stepped on the floor. Has there ever been a player that you've seen at the AAU ranks that you thought, they're good, but you never dreamed that they would step their game up to the way it is in the NBA now?
Well, I'd have to say Mike Conley was a kid that you really knew he had talent, but to be one of the highest paid players in the NBA right now, yes.
Did it – let me ask you this question right here, and I've often wondered this about Conley. The fact that he played with Greg Odom in high school and college – I think he played with him in high school. I'm not sure. Did he play with him in high school also or just college? So he's playing with a bona fide 7'1" high school, 7-foot college superstar who a lot of people thought would be the next Shaquille O'Neal. And he took a lot of the so-called superstar pressure off of Conley in the high school and college ranks. Conley was a great guard at Ohio State. Does that help a player like Conley to have a player like Odom with them that's going to shield them from some of the limelight, do you think? I mean, I'm not taking nothing away from Conley. I'm just telling you what the press did. Mm-hmm. Ohio State plays Florida in the national championship. Odom's front and center. Conley's on the team. Conley's right there behind him, but Odom gets all the attention. NBA draft comes up. Odom going top 1 or 2. Conley's going 10 to 12. Does that help a player like Conley?
Well, it doesn't hurt him.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt him at all. But now, at the end of the day, Odom is not there now.
Odom's not in the league.
And Conley is, once again, one of the highest paid players in the NBA.
If he's not the highest paid player, he is the highest paid player. You talked about another one off the air, Kawhi Leonard.
Great guy.
Out of Los Angeles.
Yes.
6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan, plays all 5 positions for lack of a better word. I don't think he takes the 5 that much, but 4 positions on the floor from time to time. You've seen him play. How did he develop from the time you saw him to the player he is now?
Well, he's definitely improved his skill setting. I mean, his jump shot's a lot better. Same thing with LeBron James. You never seen him shooting threes when he was a young kid, but now he's devastating from the outside, and he gets to the hole with ease, and not many people are going to stand in his way.
We look at these players like this. Let's transfer back to what we were talking about earlier in this show about parents. There are parents listening to this show today, and I'm going to put a warning on it that the coach ain't going to put a warning on. Your son is not the next Kobe. That's a once-in-a-lifetime player. Your son's not the next LeBron. It's a once-in-a-lifetime player. Coach, what's the best thing, again, these parents, and this is what we want to push on this subject right here with AAU before we move into the next segment, because we're going to talk about one of the superstars in high school. What's the one thing you want to say to these parents to focus them on making sure their child is well-rounded and not only a great basketball player, but gets a good education?
Okay, first and foremost, I want to make sure everybody understands I'm not critiquing you as a parent.
Right.
Okay, first and foremost. Next, we need to also understand that that's your child, therefore you're going to raise them the way you want to. Okay? But at the end of the day, are you being a positive influence on the child so that when he gets around other people, he's not misunderstood? And sometimes it's important to take away self and create a team concept in the child's mind or in the young man's mind, because you're going to benefit more when you have people helping you as opposed to when you got to always work by yourself. So surround yourself with other good kids that have the same positive energy that you have.
You mentioned to me a second ago off air, great AAU player, great high school player coming up. Whose people need to be watching?
Zion Williamson.
Zion Williamson. We're going to talk more about Zion coming up. First, want to remind you guys that the State Farm Carriage Automotive Group Classic is coming December 2nd at Milton High School in Alpharetta, Georgia. It's the coaches tournament with Trinity Christian versus Holy Innocents. Again, Johnson of Savannah versus Lithonia, Shiloh versus Langston Hughes, Pebblebrook versus Jonesboro and the Cardinals, and Milton, the home team, against Rockdale County. Going to be a great night. And we, again, are very thankful for State Farm and the Carriage Automotive Group for getting behind this, as well as all our supporters. And if you want to get involved in that, email us here at bgadgroup.com. Look us up. We'll be happy to help you at bgadgroup.com on the BG Podcast Network. Coach, we said we were going to talk about recruits and what's going on in 2016, some of the best AAU players. You mentioned a young man right up the road from our offices here in South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina. At Spartanburg Day School, the big 6'6" kid, 6'6", 230, 17 or 18-year-old. It's almost obnoxious when you talk about 6'6", 230, Zion Williamson. I want you to tell me, you told me an interesting story. Tell me one of your funniest memories of seeing, not funniest, but one of your memories of seeing Zion.
Well, when he was younger, he was like a very quiet kid as well. Very humble kid, super parents. I remember like this last year, he's just phenomenal, and he's grown and gotten better. Support, I mean, the following of Zion Williamson is unbelievable.
Now, you mentioned the story earlier, and I'm going to pick it out of you because I thought you were going to tell me about it, but about his pops, coaching his AAU team one day. Yeah. You come up on him watching him. What's his pops doing while he's coaching the team?
I love the dad and the mother. They're good people. Zion Williamson's dad is his coach. And so, as a matter of fact, they might have been out in Vegas, and his dad was coaching the team. His little brother, Zion has a little brother. I think he's like maybe 2, about 18 months old, somewhere around in there. His dad has his little brother on his shoulder, and he's asleep, but he's coaching during the game. And I guess his daddy felt like, well, hey, listen, big brother's out there taking care of business, so I got the little brother on my shoulder right here. We're enjoying the game as a family unit. And I thought that was very special.
That's awesome. That's all. Rivals has Zion ranked the second best player in 2018, the prospect player. And if you go online and look at Rivals' list, he can virtually go to any college he wants to in the country. I'm going to mention a couple names to you. You may know him, you may not. R.J. Barrett, Mount Verde Academy.
Very good very good athletic kid as well. He's in the super program. Mount Verde is always near the top every year.
Will a kid get ranked a little higher? And we could do a whole show on these rivals and these ranking systems and how they rank players. And, guys, you can go back and look at how players were ranked. But if a kid plays for Mount Verde, a kid plays for Oak Hill, a kid plays for one of these top programs in the country, and then a kid plays for, like Zion plays for Spartanburg Day School, which is not – it's a great program in the state of South Carolina, but it's nationally not known as a powerhouse program like an Oak Hill. Will a kid get a higher ranking just based on association sometimes with a powerhouse school, do you believe?
Well, the best thing about Zion's program is he's going to put them in the same events that the Oak Hills and the Mount Verdes are in. So the other people on his team are going to get just as much exposure. I mean, I'm not going to say they were going to win because he's definitely going to need some more help when you come up against the Oak Hills and the Mount Zions and the Lalamirs. So, and those other kids in those programs are going to be seen as well.
Last year, 2017, when you looked at high school basketball, a lot of people said it was the year of the giant, so to speak, because you had the Marvin Bagleys, the 6'10s at Dukes. You know, you had Michael Porter, Seattle, Washington, and, you know, DeAndre Ayton from Hillcrest Academy, 7 foot, going to Arizona. Top 3 kids ranked in the West Coast, Coach. I mean, all 6'9" or bigger. You look to the East Coast. We had some incredible athletes in the East Coast that's going to make a name for themselves this year in college basketball too. Tell us a little bit of what you saw from kids like Wendell Carter over at Pace Academy.
Well, I like Wendell Carter. He's very skilled, tremendous body, and he's going to only get better being at Duke. We also had a kid out of our program, Jordan Tucker. He's at Duke as well. Very good shooter, and I'm going to love to see him play this year. Now, Colin Sexton, he's a tremendous athlete, very good player.
He chose Alabama. Let's just talk plain here. Alabama is traditionally not a basketball power, although they've had some great players in the past pass through Alabama. Let's go back to what we talked about earlier. What makes a player like that go to an Alabama?
Well, I think Avery Johnson, who's had many years of experience in the NBA and being around the game, a tremendous player himself. The general is what they call him.
Yeah.
So that's a good upside for Colin. They definitely are a very athletic team. Alabama also has a kid named Daniel Gittens who went to Wheeler High School his freshman, sophomore, and junior year.
East Coast, West Coast. Who plays better high school basketball?
I'm prejudiced. I'm going with East Coast.
East Coast?
Yes.
You told me earlier you coached the McDonald's All-American game one time. Kevin Durant's playing for Maryland, nonetheless. Folks, Kevin Durant played high school basketball in Maryland. I know when you see him on TV, they talk about what a big Texas guy he is.
Yes.
We'll go into that story later on how Kevin Durant got in Maryland. We do the McDonald's All-American game. You're coaching the East Coast. You're assuming when you're going there, Durant's going to be on your team. You know he's like Zion Williamson. Everybody's watching him, and he ends up on the West Coast. How's that happen, Coach?
Well, you tell me, because we could have used him that night.
You could have used. You won the game, though, didn't you?
No.
You didn't win a game?
No.
Hold on just a second. All these years, and you didn't win the big one.
Well, let's just put it like this. It was for a very good cause. The Ronald McDonald House does tremendous things for the kids.
That's it. Hey, guys, thank you for listening to the Coach Doug Lipscomb Show on the BG Podcast Network. I want to remind you before we close out the show today that the State Farm Carriage Automotive Group Classic is coming. Yes, it's coming once again, December 2nd to Milton High School. You're going to see some of the greatest teams in the state of Georgia, including Milton, Rockdale, Pebblebrook, Jonesboro, Shiloh, Langston Hughes, Johnson of Savannah, Lithonia, Trinity Christian, and Holy Innocents that day. You don't want to miss it, and certainly we'll be there. Who knows, we may interview you and put you on the Coach Doug Lipscomb Show, get some man-in-the-street stuff and that sort of stuff. Earlier in the day, Coach, before we closed out the show, and we're going to go over rankings real quick, and, you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but high school basketball rankings right now, See what you know about it. And again, USA Today's coming up saying West Coast is number one, Coach. I'm going to see what you know about them. And folks, look, Coach has won 600 games. He's coached against he's coached against high school teams all across the country. He can't know everybody, so I'm catching him off guard a little bit. So what you know of the program, Coach, just throw something out there. Number one team, there's two teams in the country tied number one. You may know something about them. Nathan Hill out of Seattle. You ever heard of him?
No, I haven't.
They number one. They must have some superstar player. Sierra Canyon out of Chatsworth, California.
Yes, I've heard of Sierra Canyon.
What you know about him?
Always a very good program.
They're 17-1 right now. Chena Hills, number 3.
That's where your Ball brothers are from.
The Ball brothers.
Yes.
That's a good segue into our closing spot. Don't you think so, Cody? We've talked, and certainly the influence of our show today has been on players from the AAU translating over to high school, moving into college. We've mentioned the greats, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, the once-in-a-lifetime athletes. We all know there's athletes born in any sport who are just God-given ability, and they're going to make it no matter what. If it's baseball, it could be Mike Trout or Bryce Harper. They're there. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, they're there. Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, they're there. But we've touched today on those players that have worked hard, the Kawhi Leonards, the people like that Mike Conleys, that have progressed their games. We've got Mr. Ball out in California, who from a marketing standpoint has done his children an incredible job. But it's a double-edged sword. Wouldn't you agree, Coach?
Well,
what do you think? I can tell you what I think, but you tell me what you think.
Okay, I wouldn't say it's a double-edged sword, because if he's being, I would say, successful in what he's trying to accomplish, for example, if he's trying to be a businessman, he's doing a tremendous job. I'll just give you just off the top. If his kid has a name brand shoe, Baller brand shoe, and that's his son's shoe, it's about making profit. And now they've started a business that his kids can continue throughout their life. Now, would I wear a pair of those shoes? I mean, no. But let's say this right here. It's funny when you go to China, you get your Nikes or whatever, they may say Japan, or they may say China on the bottom. Those shoes are probably going to say just made around the corner. But back to serious note. The dad is doing a tremendous job, like I say, of marketing, and it's making their family money. For example, one day they said that the kid was driving a Lamborghini. Well, no disrespect to anybody that lives in an apartment complex, but I don't think that car is going to be parked at an apartment complex. That car is going to be parked at a house where you would see or expect a Lamborghini or a Bentley or something like that to be parked. So it's all very profitable for their family, and that's good.
From a media standpoint, just pure basketball standpoint, let's take finances out of it, okay? Because from a finance standpoint, it's like you said, he went in asking Adidas and Nike and Under Armour for $80 million, I think. And then when they all said, higher than that, Cody?
Yeah.
Big dollars, $100 million,
Yeah.
$200 million. More than that.
He wanted
$1 billion for Mr. Ball's shoe.
Okay.
All righty, $1 billion. They said, nope, you crazy. Mr. Ball goes out and develops his own shoe. Rest is history. So from a marketing and media standpoint, he's done an excellent job. Let's take money out of it, Coach. How do you rein a kid and parent in like that if he's on your team? You mentioned earlier, and I'm going to throw you into the water, Coach, and make you swim out. You mentioned earlier, it's about team. For the average guy out there like me who's listening, and the average fan out there who's listening, what we hear in the media, this ain't about team. This is about Mr. Ball making money for his son. Let's take the purist back into it. We mentioned LeBron. LeBron knew he couldn't win it by himself, so he had to have a team. They go get him some players. Kobe couldn't win it by himself. He had to go get team. Is it going to be hard now to transition a young man or a family like that when there's so much of a me perception to a team perception? Thoughts?
Well, when you say perception, of course, many people will say that's reality. But on the other hand, when you're behind closed doors with the rest of your teammates, it's about pumping that kid up, but it also creates a situation where they're getting notoriety as well. Now, the situation from the media's perspective was Mr. Ball homeschooled his son because the coach wanted him to be more of a playmaker. Well, I've been around athletes for a very long time, and players are going to make plays, the playmakers. So your best player is who you want the ball in his hands at the end of the game. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works out with the younger ball kid.
So what you're saying, players make plays. Parents don't put kids in position to make plays.
Well, he has.
Yeah, he has. And you know what? Let's just face it. We've seen this in high school. Let's take one of the greatest basketball players in NBA history. Larry Bird goes to play for the General Bobby Knight. It didn't work out too good, did it?
No.
Not at all. He goes to Indiana State and takes a team that nobody's never heard of and takes him to the national championship and built a – so you know what? I'll go back to two-edged sword. It can work because think about it this way. If Bird had never been the player at Indiana State he was, everybody would always said, well, he didn't listen to Coach Knight. So I guess I can see it on both hands. Coach, it's been fun this afternoon, has it not?
Most definitely.
And we're going to give you more and more information about the best in high school basketball, not only here nationally, but in Georgia and around the Southeast. We're going to touch more on AAU. We're going to talk more college coaching and how to get your son, and you can transpose this over, how to get your daughter recruited. Coach got a daughter right now playing, probably a superstar. We won't touch into that, but I know he's proud of her. But you've been listening to the Coach Doug Lipscomb Show on the BG Podcast Network. Want to remind you once again, the big State Farm Carriage Automotive Group Classic is coming December 2nd at Milton High School, Alpharetta, Georgia. Trinity Christian, Holy Innocents, Johnson of Savannah, Lithonia, Shiloh, Langston Hughes, Pebblebrook, Jonesboro, Milton, and Rockdale. Coach, as always, it's been fun.
It's been great. Look forward to being back.
We'll do this next week. You're listening to the Coach Doug Lipscomb Show on the BG Podcast Network.